Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% of people of society? Yes, I have made it on my own in this world. Will nothing to get a turn around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, 'cause I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Hi everyone. I'm afraid that John D. Clare isn't here this week. So we have me sub-hosting for John. So you'll have to all bear with me. So I'm going to start off with the moment of the week. So I'm going to go to Paul first for his moment of the week. Oh, no. Sorry, everyone. That was the first mistake. I haven't said hello. We're all going to say hello. Oh, hello.
And then we'll go...
Thank you. See, I knew I couldn't do John justice with this. So, Paul, what was your moment of the week?
I think you will do John justice here. I think you'll do an absolutely brilliant job as soon as you are relaxed and stop worrying about it, because you will be absolutely brilliant as you always are. Thanks for saying I've got a nice haircut there, Paul. Yeah, thanks. Maybe that could be my moment of the week as I went and got my haircut. I guess my moment of the week this week is that I'm on the ballot for the National Policy Forum of the Labour Party for everyone who's interested in that kind of thing. Obviously, we aren't a Labour Party exclusive socialist think tank or anything like that. Everyone is welcome here. But yeah, I've been successful. I've been nominated by 4 different CLPs so far. And it's only the northern region, so that would be my moment of the week. It actually happened last week, but I had a different moment of the week then. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to be on a national ballot for the Labour Party, so hopefully we'll be successful on that, and we'll find out exactly what the National Policy Forum is all about, if anything.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Sam, what was your moment of the week?
I spent a few days last week at the NEU conference. First time delegate, first time speaker. Except the only thing I got to speak was I formally second this motion, which I said while running past the microphone. Because we had literally 3 minutes to pass a motion and an amendment on young people who are in care. So, and we did it. So well done me. So I'm very, very excited about that and looking forward to see that content appearing in NEU campaigns.
That sounds brilliant.
Can I just say that was literally my first experience of speaking at a conference, was just getting up and saying formally seconded. I was like, that was the first time I spoke on a stage in a conference, because there was nothing more to add than that. So yeah, weird coincidences there, Samantha.
We're in good company. We're all about getting down to business, Paul.
Right, then I'm going to go to Stuart. What was your moment of the week?
My moment of the week is a community one. As you all know, it was Easter not long back, and we all do bits of Easter egg hunts, don't we, in the community groups? Well, I did a QR code one. So I had QR codes that sent you the clues around the village, and people would participate in that. But my moment is, I'm pretty sure somebody did this hunt in a car. They managed to do a 40-minute walk in about 6 minutes. So they were desperate to win their little, sweetie prize at the end. And there was a couple of kids who were doing it on an electric scooter, like one scooter between 3 bands, and racing around the village. And it was a bit like that movie, is it Rat Race, where they're all racing against each other and trying to, outdo one another. So it was great fun.
Oh, did you get an Easter egg?
I didn't. I don't like chocolate.
I don't know what to say to that. I'm going to move on to Neil now, because that's terrible. But a very good moment. Neil, what was your moment of the week?
Yeah, I've got I'm quite lucky in terms of the work that I do see some quite interesting things. And on Saturday night, I attended a lantern parade in a park in Saltaire, which is just near Bradford. And it was part of the World Heritage Day. And it was a lantern parade organised by a fantastic arts group here in Bradford called Cecil Green Arts. And we were followed around we were led rather by the Peace Artists, which is a Bradford-based street brass band that are as fantastic as ever. So that was really good. Then also kind of like there was a duck race in Hebden Bridge yesterday, where the river in the centre of the town was filled with 13,500 rubber ducks, which was quite an impressive sight, very interesting, and a lot of fun. But I've also got to say also that moment of the week for me was also that motion passed by Sam as well. As a care leaver, it's always great when actually people give a damn about us, because we are often left behind in the education system, where local authority etc. leave us behind. So I'm actually very proud of Sam for organising that together with a colleague as well. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Neil. Yeah, I was so happy when I heard about that too, actually. Bonnie mentioned it on the show on Saturday night too, and I just thought that's so lovely. I'm so pleased. So, yeah, so Vonnie was talking about the NEU conference. Sam, was your conference a different conference? Or were you at the
We
NEU?
were there together, yeah.
Ah, because I didn't know you were a teacher. So then I just suddenly
I'm an
thought, oh my
educator.
gosh, was it a different conference? And I just said something really stupid. And you just both did something brilliant that was the same at two different conferences. Right, so I think now I need to Paul to do the jingle for the big story. Is that right? Seamless.
Now it's time for the big story.
Right, so I'm going to go to Stuart first to explain what the big story is. What is the ministerial code?
The Ministerial Code. The Ministerial Code is a 31-page document that outlines how ministers should behave in Parliament with regards to the Nolan principles. The integrity, selflessness, transparency. That the basic things that we expect of our leaders. Whether it's a governance document of any kind, it isn't really, and it's just a very recent addition to our political landscape. For a long time, it used to just be a backdoors thing. It was only under John Major that a similar document became even published to the public, and it was only under Tony Blair did it actually become the ministerial code that we roughly know today. And it's our expectations of how ministers are supposed to behave.
And do you think it's been breached?
I do. Even in its very vaguest terms, I think it's been breached. But the problem with it is that with it, it's got no legal background as such. It's like one of those things where it has the expectation that everyone's a good old chap and that everyone should be trusted, and you can't call anyone a liar. And it's, your own integrity that you would come forward to resign, that you would do the honourable thing. But we don't live in a world where ministers are, honourable or full of integrity anymore. We've got literal crooks and monsters in Parliament right now.
How would you say that it has been breached recently?
Well, I think the obvious one, the one that everyone's getting to, is that ministers can't mislead Parliament. So they can't give false information. They can't be misleading with the information that they provide. Certainly, Boris Johnson on several occasions has come forward to say that he wasn't at a party. There was definitely no parties. Even if there was a party, it was definitely COVID-free. All restrictions were met, and he'd communicated that a number of times in Parliament, and these things have been systematically being proven to be untrue, which means that on numerous occasions that he's misled Parliament. Rishi Sunak is in a similar situation. He also had communicated that he had not attended any parties whatsoever. That's clearly been found to be untrue because a police investigation has found him to be at a party. So that's the big one for everyone.
And why do you think it matters if the Prime Minister and MPs have breached the ministerial code?
The ministerial code is based around the Nolan principles, and the big one is leadership for me in that at this level. The Prime Minister is supposed to be a person that you're supposed to look at and say, right, we know that he's selflessly acting in the best interests of the British people. And the very second that he operates in his own self-interest in that role, he can no longer be trusted with the best interests of the nation. So if he's willing to lie about the very simple things, the things that you would hope were, be honest about it and take the lumps at the time. Don't tell a lie, just get it out of the way. He's clearly not capable of doing that. What else is he willing to lie about? And it sets a really deep precedent for what the expectations of the next leader of this nation would be. what we can expect from leaders in the future globally. If people think that this is how a country like Great Britain, in Westminster can operate, what stops other nations from modelling themselves on those expectations?
And do you think there's been a decline in standards in Parliament leading up to this point?
Incredibly so. Certainly, even if you go back to Theresa May's government, you'll have seen Damien Green. Was it? He resigned, wasn't he, when they found that he'd lied about pornography on his works computer, which is it's a rough thing. But he resigned, moved on, and that Theresa May's government wasn't anything fabulous for the British people, but there was certainly more ethics there than there are now. Then you move on to Priti Patel, when she had broken the ministerial code when she'd been found to have bullied people, but there was no resignation then, and it's been a drumming along of that same mentality that you can do whatever you want, you can say whatever you want, and that there's no one to hold you accountable, because in this system you've got to hold yourself accountable. It's like going to the golf course by yourself and saying, "Oh yeah, I got 18 holes in one," because no one else was there to watch you.
So what is going to happen about this? How is the code going to be upheld as it stands?
I would imagine that there's going to be a number of debates on it, and every time that the Conservative Party doesn't agree to investigate itself, the government doesn't internally look into the position that they've taken, it kind of shows that they've been caught red-handed. If you're saying, look, don't investigate us because you might find something, that says that there's something to find.
It does. Thank you, Stuart. So I'm going to ask Neil, what do you find more concerning, the fact that we appear to have a Prime Minister who feels that he can mislead Parliament, or the fact that he's likely to get away with it?
I think both are just as serious, aren't they, really? I mean, Boris Johnson is a proven liar. He's been sacked God knows how many times as a result of lying. I mean, even Theresa May sacked him for lying. I mean, that's how bad you have to be sacked from Theresa May's government. And I think, from what I remember, I think he was probably the only one, or one of the few. So I think, I mean, my view of it is it undermines the entire trust. I mean, what's the point of having a ministerial code if politicians, including the Prime Minister, can just ignore it when it suits them? It's nothing more than a market employ then. It's something to say, well, these are the standards that we expect. We're not going to uphold it, but it's what we expect of others, not of us. We expect it of politicians, not us. Hold on, but we're politicians. Who haven't thought that bit? You know what I mean? So, but the thing is, as well, is that it undermines the entire trust in the Prime Minister. I mean, he is a proven liar. I mean, I was watching the debate today where he spoke in Parliament, and it was actually quite interesting because he basically said that he didn't mislead Parliament. Peter Bone, Tory MP, did ask him directly, "Did you mislead Parliament?" To which he said no. But he said there was, as Stuart rightly said, he did say there was no parties in Downing Street, but then there was, and he attended them. So you can't get away from that now. He did directly lie. But all of the questions that I heard from Tory MPs were pretty much saying, "Well, did you? Well, he can't resign because there's this war in Ukraine. That he has to deal with." I'm like, well, but we're not part of it, are we? I didn't realise we're part of this war. Or the other one was, well, there's a cost of living crisis that he's got to deal with. Well, these are blooming cause of it. But also, there wasn't one question about the cost of living crisis in Boris Johnson today, which tells you really what it's all about. It's about saving his bum. That's what it's really about. And there's no point in having a ministerial code if the Prime Minister can just blatantly ignore it and just expect everyone to move on and there'll be nothing of it. It's a bit like a disciplinary procedure at work that never holds anyone to account. It becomes meaningless. But let's not forget, one thing that was raised a few times in Parliament today was apparently Boris Johnson nearly died from COVID in April 2020, which I find quite funny that funny, strange, not ha-ha, that, that he was attending parties just weeks after being in ICU, where apparently he was so close to death. So if he can't tell the truth about parties being held in Downing Street until he then gets a fine, and he then has to admit it by paying the fine, why should we then believe him about something like that as well? And not that as well, but doesn't that just absolute kick sand in the eyes of everyone who's been affected by the pandemic and everyone who's lost somebody during this pandemic as a result of this government's incompetence right from the start, right from when, the warnings were there in 2019, but this government chose not to act. And I think we kind of get lost in the thing about talk about the ministerial code as much as it is important. It's a change in the system that we need. It's not really, it's the system we have is not fit for purpose, and it's not holding into account.
Thank you, Neil. Paul, to what extent can a system that relies on MPs resigning of their own integrity through free will if they mislead Parliament have a place in our democracy?
I think it's archaic, really, isn't it? I think we've got a system that's supposed to be based on some form of honour and some form of code that people are living by, but it actually promotes shameless people. So people who have no shame, who have no integrity, who have no honour, do really, really well out of this. I'm going to have to slightly correct the record, Neil. He didn't get sacked by Theresa May. He resigned in order to bring her down for his own purposes. So it's the same thing, isn't it? He was sacked by, I think it was Michael Howard as a minister, and he was sacked by the Daily Telegraph as a columnist. So he has been sacked, and both times that was for lying. And I think we can also assume that, when he resigned under Theresa May, his real reason was probably to bring her down. I think that's what we're going to assume. Now, a system in which this happens, it's an absolute mess. It is an absolute mess. And when Stuart brought up Damien Green, I started laughing. The guy was using a computer at work for the government, and he was just watching hours and hours and hours of pornography, according to reports. Now, what was he doing? What's the guy doing? And apparently, this low bar that Damien Green set of resigning for doing something like that, and he only had to resign as a minister as well. He didn't resign as an MP. He didn't have to go away in disgrace. He's still an MP as far as I know. And, that low bar hasn't even been reached at all. And the sad thing for me is, without this, without people having honour, without people doing the right thing, then, where does that leave the whole parliamentary system? The whole system's corrupt right to its very core, in my view. There are so many people saying so many stupid, they will just say anything. Like my local MP said, if he broke the law, I'm paraphrasing here, but if he broke the law, then he'll have to resign, because in order for people to have confidence in the system, he's going to have to go if this happens. And then when I found out he had broken the law, he went, well, I think a little bit of cheese and wine isn't really a party, is it? And it's like, stop it, man. Stop it. It was a birthday party with a birthday cake. Yeah, okay, he might have been behaving like a toddler, as usual, by having a little birthday party. I imagine him with a little daft hat on, having this thing and looking around, really pleased with himself because he's having a birthday party. But it was a party. He knew it was a party. Everyone knew that they were having these little parties. And it doesn't matter how crap the parties were. It wasn't the kind of party I want to do. Full of Tories, cheese and wine. I'm not really drinking anymore, and I don't eat cheese. But, it doesn't matter whether the party was absolutely crap and whether it's not what we would see as a party. They broke the law that they made, and they don't care. And they got found out, and they really don't care. and people are asking the wrong questions in Parliament as well. People should be putting pressure on, and all you get is from people who support Boris Johnson or whatever is like, oh well, but Labour, and oh well, but Jerome crumbles. You know, what's he been doing? And this is the situation we find ourselves in. It's just a load of whataboutery. He broke the law. We know this. He shouldn't be in charge of the country anyway. And I think part of the reason that people aren't calling for his head is they knew he was a big liar anyway. You know, and it doesn't really come as a surprise. And no one has any faith in the system, which is terrifying, really.
Thank you. That's really worrying. Sam, how heartfelt do you think Johnson's apology was today? And given the fact that there is a war on, do you think the French should be calling off their election right now?
I think it's really easy to say, oh, well, there's a war, we can't be messing with our political leaders. But I mean, I don't think there's very much political difference on the issue of the war in Ukraine at the moment. I don't think Keir Starmer would do anything particularly different. I don't think that any other Conservative would do anything particularly different than what is happening in terms of helping the Ukrainian people defend themselves in the limited way in which we are. So I think that's really a really insincere and sort of cheeky way of trying to slip out of the net. I mean, we've talked during this discussion about what the code of conduct is for and what these types of rules, you know, why they're meant to be in place. But you know, let's not forget, these are rules made by powerful people to protect powerful people, and they're intentionally toothless. I remember going to my first and I'm not a powerful person, going to my first briefing on the councillor's code of conduct, and they say, oh, you mustn't do this, and you mustn't do that, and you mustn't do this. Okay, what happens if I do that? And they're like, oh, well, we might have to censure you. And I'm like, oh, that sounds terrible. What does that mean? That means we have to say something in public that says we disagree with what you did. Is that it? that is the strongest, you know, unless I literally break the law and I get thrown in prison, as some councillors do, then I can be kicked out of the council. But unless I do that, the council does not have the power to remove me from office. And you know, it's the same with the code of conduct for the MPs. They've got to resign because they've got honour. These people don't have honour, so they're absolutely impenetrable. They can do whatever they want. It's absolutely crazy, but it's exactly how the system was designed.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go back to Stuart and to ask, what do you think we can do about this?
Well, we have to keep applying pressure. I mean, we need to at least be communicating with our communities that, you know, we don't see these people as being fit for purpose. But, you know, if there's ever a chance to say, look, I don't like Boris Johnson, and somebody asks you why, this is the perfect time to say, well, this is why. Because I can't trust him. I can't trust him when he says he's going to get us millions of pounds for our potholes, and we can't trust him if he's going to give us a bypass. You know, you can't trust them on any of that the second that you can't trust them to not lie. So take that opportunity.
Thank you. So I'm just going to look at the comments from the viewers. So you've just had a comment in from John. Thank you, John, for watching. So we are missing you. He says the political justification of the war, if there is one, is to defend democracy. So it's even more important that he upholds the standards of our democracy. He cannot fight for democracy abroad whilst trashing it at home. That's so well put. That's why you're the normal host, John. Then we have got Colin says, I hope that this all-time low of unethical ministers and prime minister is a wake-up call and standards are rewritten and become enforceable. Jacqueline says MPs are held more accountable for accusing other MPs of wrongdoing than MPs are of actual wrongdoing. It was only a few months ago Dawn Butler got chucked out, wasn't it, for for calling Johnson a liar when I think he had lied. And I think she got the same punishment as my local MP, who had suggested to a judge that they give her husband, our former MP, a lighter sentence for his sexual assault conviction. So that was nice. And then we've got Anthony says, what is the point of having a code if there is no intention to follow this ministerial code? And then at the beginning, I missed the comments at the beginning, but Jacqueline was asking Stuart if you were talking about the wacky races that used to be on children's TV when you were talking about Leo Cunt. So
yeah, it was totally like that. It was fascinating to be a part of. I'm glad I put it together just to see it all.
And there was some support from you, from Paul, in the comments. He can't stand milk chocolate either, so maybe I'm not right. Right, then I will go on to the next topic. Is sending refugees to Rwanda pretty bonkers? So Paul, what is happening with refugees and Rwanda?
So recently we've seen an upsurge in sympathy towards refugees. Finally, we've got a media narrative around what's going on in Ukraine, where refugees are people who are under threat, who are fleeing for their lives, who are in a country for maybe they've been displaced by war, maybe they're scared of their own government, maybe they can't live the life that they're supposed to live wherever they are. And people are starting to come around to this idea after years and years of demonisation and like horrible little rich fellas wearing tweed staring at the ocean and looking at boats, you know, and like, oh, who's coming to invade our little bit of land, thinking that they're trying to defend that stupid map from this morning years ago, you know, because like Britain's that small. But so we've had this like a more sensible, more positive view of refugees. But then, throughout this scandal, and it can't have necessarily been released just because of the Partygate scandal, but I think they probably took it into consideration when releasing it. In the background, the UK has been exploring a strategy where they will process, and process is a word that has been used historically about Jewish people in Nazi Germany. When they wanted to deal with people, they said, "Oh, we'll process them here." So, like, you know, there's a language problem there as well, where they're othering people, where they're going, "Oh yeah, we're just going to take them, process them," and they're going to process any refugees who come across on boats across the English Channel in Rwanda. They're going to send them to Rwanda in order to not see if they're fit to be in the UK, not to see if they can get safe passage to the UK. They're just putting them there. So even if they were, even if their claim was legitimate to come to the UK as a refugee, even if it's found that, they're still going to have to stay in Rwanda. So basically, this is the UK saying we want nothing to do with refugees if they come across the channel, because the ones coming across the channel come from places where there's been war, often caused by the West, Syria, Yemen, you know, those kind of refugees that may have brown skin. This is not going to apply to Ukrainian refugees, who are largely people with white skin. You've got to think there's an element of racism here, and you know, they're just going to be sent. It's like the Labour Party arguing it's a great cost. I kind of get that argument, because it is going to be a greater cost than it would be just to provide safe routes to come across to the UK. But I don't think that's the primary argument. This is inhumane. Rwanda, the UK last year accepted 4 refugees from Rwanda. It is not a safe place for LGBT people, for example. And, you know, if we're accepting refugees from a place, if we think they need political asylum from Rwanda, why are we sending other people to Rwanda where we know it not to be fully safe for people? And this has got to be a nasty, racist, inhuman, unthinkable policy. And even right-wing people like the likes of Ian Dale on LBC and like people who stood as Tories and even people within the Tory party, even hostile environment Theresa May is saying this is inhumane. She sent vans around London saying go home. You know, she's not ethically, she's not an unracist person. She's done racist things. And yet people are saying that this is absolutely inhumane. What are they doing? It is disgusting.
And will Rwanda be a safe place for refugees offshore from the UK, do you think?
Well, given that some of the refugees so this has happened before. So Uganda and Rwanda were used by Israel's government to deal with any refugees that wanted to go there. And they've used this in the past. And when they've gone there, what they have is they have a kind of camp. Like, it's not necessarily a concentration camp, but not vastly removed from it anyway. And some of the refugees who were there started to riot. Not riot, maybe, just complain. Actually, sorry, I may have misrepresented that one. They started to complain that they weren't getting enough food. So they started to shoot them. This is not a safe place for anyone, who, like, whether they're a refugee. And as I said earlier on, we have been accepting refugees from Rwanda. I don't think we should be sending anyone anywhere that we're having to accept refugees from. It's just incredibly, incredibly wrong. It's just vile, isn't it?
It's disgusting. So how do you think that this new policy will stop people risking their lives to get to the UK through unsafe routes? And as Rees-Mogg has suggested, take refugees out of the clutches of traffickers?
Well, if there are other ways to do that, it's funny. There's a lot of talk at the moment, and I've noticed it in the chat as well. People are talking about economic migrants, where they're trying to categorize people as either economic migrants. More and more, even refugees are being categorized as economic migrants because apparently they're not allowed in. You know, if you want to make your life better, you're not allowed to come here because we're full. That kind of nasty rhetoric anyway. But yeah, what the government want to do is make it absolutely unthinkable that they would try to come here, because when they get caught, they're going to be deported to Rwanda. That's the deterrent, isn't it? They're not trying to be humane. They're not saying Rwanda's a great country or whatever. They're saying, I'm going to send you to Rwanda. If you try and come over here, we'll send you to Rwanda. Now, when Israel did it, they had to stop. Amnesty International again said it was inhumane, but apparently that doesn't matter anymore. But what they found is the refugees were escaping and coming back. So so what might happen is we might fly a load of people to Rwanda and then they'll make a slow migration up towards Europe again. You might find that this is happening. I don't think that people on boats are really thinking clearly. I don't think that that narrative around, oh, they're in a safe country at the moment, like in the Calais jungle, they're in awful conditions. They want to escape. They want to come to somewhere where they think that they've got a link, whether that's a family link, whether that's a linguistic link, whether they just love Britain. You know, the way a lot of flag waving people are like, oh, we love Britain. These people might really, really love Britain and want to be here. Great. You know, if they want to come here and make a life here and stuff, absolutely brilliant. But instead, we're trying to push these people away, make their lives as difficult as possible. But I don't think it's going to stop people trying to come over in dinghies, because I think these people are desperate. So desperate people don't think clearly. They're not going to go, well, I'll just go there and get deported to Rwanda. They'll say, I'll try my luck anyway. How can it be any worse? Because that must be what they're doing, to try and cross the channel on a raft made out of Coke cans.
And I come in on that as well. The argument that it's going to break the business model of the people traffickers is an absolute joke. Do you think the people traffickers tell the truth all the time? Do you think the people traffickers care? Right? If they traffic people here and then they get deported to Rwanda, they don't care. They're not going to tell people who they are trafficking the truth. A lot of people trafficked here don't even want to come here, right? They don't ask to, they come off the boat and they ask where they are. They get the passports taken off them. They're trafficked here for slavery, working in cannabis farms, working in brothels against their will. You know, it's not a holiday. They're not coming here for some nice jobs. They're coming here because they're being forced here by horrendous people who don't tell the truth all the time. So the idea that it's going to break the business model just shows to me that they absolutely don't understand what the business model is.
Thanks, Sam. And Sam, do you agree with Priti Patel when she suggests that she's put this forward because no one else is offering any alternative solutions?
Well, I mean, there's lots of people out there. There are people who theorize and offer solutions on this all the time. This is one of the things that's opened my eyes as somebody who's interested in policies and ideas. There are literally departments in universities across the country who are constantly theorizing, putting out journals and policy papers that are all costed. There's loads of policies out there if you're listening. But the fact of the matter is, this government has been elected on a very right-wing ticket, and they need to, if they want to stay in power, they know they've got to keep those voters on side. And I'm not saying that all Conservative voters are racist, but I'm saying that a lot of UKIP votes and a lot of those very far right votes went to the Conservatives, and they're trying to keep them. And this is one way they do that. The way you talk to some people, you'd think there's boats washing up every 5 minutes. I've got to tell you, I was at Bournemouth the other day. I did not see a single boat wash up on this shore. You know, it's just a real hysteria they've whipped up, and now they've got to follow through with it. So it's their own bed that they've made, and I'm glad that, I'm glad that people are starting to see it for what it is. And I just hope that this ridiculous idea of sending people to Rwanda is kicked into the long grass as soon as possible.
Thank you. Neil, do you think that the UK has a moral obligation to take in refugees, and why do you think that?
Yeah, I do. We've been involved in so many wars in the countries where these people are fleeing from, and the trail that they're coming from is through countries that we've been bombing and invading in one way or another for a number of years. So yeah, absolutely, I do think we have an absolute moral obligation. You know, you see, I like some of the myths that the government come up with. You know, well, they should go to the first safe country. Well, there's no rules specifying that you should have to do that in international law. The other one is that it's illegal to cross the channel. It's not illegal to cross the channel. You know, it's another one that I really like. You know, there's lots of ones like this, and they talk about, well, you know, and Sam, my God, Sam, that was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant what you just said. You know, it's right. What the government are doing is not going to take the bottom out of the market, not by a long shot. It's going to prop it up, and the reason is because, you know, they can create safe ways people come here. Why don't we do it that people can go to a British embassy anywhere in the world and apply for asylum there? Why is it that you can only apply for asylum once you reach the UK only? That rule in itself makes it more likely that people are going to pay the smugglers to get people in little boats and get them over here so that they can then claim asylum. And the Tories love to talk about illegal immigration. Well, these illegal immigrants don't jump off a boat and run to the nearest police officer and say, how do I register for asylum? No, they disappear. And we've got no idea how many illegal immigrants there are anyway. But we're always concerned about these little tiny dinghies full of people. We're never concerned about the huge yachts, which are full of people who evade tax. You know, that's never an issue. It's always the small ones. But the thing is this as well. We're talking about Rwanda. One thing that Priti Patel said today in Parliament was that if you're questioning the human rights record of Rwanda, it's to quote her, she said it's incredibly xenophobic. That coming from this government, to accuse other people of being xenophobic, my hypocrisy meter it smashed this afternoon because of that, and it's like, but this is a government as well, as Paul correctly pointed out, that did actually this government did complain about the human rights record of Rwanda just a year ago. So, yes, we do have a moral obligation to take people in that are in need. We've got more than enough space for it. But also, as Paul pointed out, there is an element of racism at the very heart of this. Because look at the difference we're doing. For Ukrainians, it's look, open your home up. We'll pay you 350 quid a month, however much it is. We'll pay you this money so people can come. Forget about those people that are in detention centres at the moment. You know what I mean? Forget about the fact that they're wanting to open a new detention centre in County Durham, which Stuart can tell us all about, because he's heavily involved in that campaign. Forget about that, because they're brown people that go there. We're only interested in the white ones. So yes, we have a moral obligation. They're coming from war zones, and I think most of us would agree that there is no difference between them. They're coming from war zones. They deserve our respect, and they deserve our help. And and we have to break the model by breaking the model of the government. That's the only way that it's going to work. And as Sam correctly said, they're appealing to a right-wing base. When they're in trouble, they always appeal to a right-wing base every time. And it's a dead cat strategy. That's what this is. We really need to be getting the RSPCA into Downing Street, because I'm actually worried about that cat that sits on the step at Downing Street, because that's going to be the next cat that's going to be dead and thrown on the table of this government. And whilst we're trying to work out what they do next to get themselves out the next thing, and I forget the name of the cat, but
Larry.
What was it?
Larry
the cat. That's the one. I fear for his safety at the moment. I really do.
He's a very likely scapegoat. He'll be next. Thanks, Neil. Stuart, a lot of people in this country are suffering from the fact that we've got unaffordable rents, a lack of social housing. In a lot of areas, it's very difficult to find good, properly paid, secure employment. What would you say to someone that says they have concerns that the UK can't afford to take in refugees because they're suffering from these pressures themselves?
Yeah. Earlier, I know that our instincts were to, put the economics of this to the back end of the argument, where when I'm having conversations with like genuine racists, trying to convince them of other things, I start with the economics. And I think we've missed a couple of points along the way as discussing this. I think that the government does understand the business practices of the criminals. I actually think that the government wants in on it. I think that the government is privatizing immigration. When you think that you're shipping somebody off halfway around the world, who gets the contract to ship them there? Who gets the contract to hold them there? Who gets the contract to, go through the process of all this? And I think it's what's happening in Durham, as they're creating more needless parts of this mechanism to keep people in this system. They're moving towards a model that's going to pay them. I'm sure some minister will have connections in Rwanda who will end up with a big government contract. And ultimately, at the moment, it currently costs about 14 grand a year. With regards to an asylum seeker coming here, going through the application, support and housing. It's looking at being over £100,000 per head with this current plan. Now, I've got communities out here who would love 100 grand for a community hub, or 15 grand to support a food bank, or 5 grand to fix some potholes down the street. Like, there's a real screaming need for cash injections in our community, and we're allowing that money to be shipped off to hurt people. And another thing that we haven't noticed is that the plan is to ship off men. They don't plan to ship off women or children. And the criminal model, as Sam's touched on, predominantly leans into pushing women, younger women especially, into very dangerous situations. Certainly, I know of a case in Teesside, and I won't go into too much detail, where a young woman had been shipped into this country, for want of a better word, and the government were looking to send her home. So they rounded her up, and she was going through the legal process. She didn't know where home was. When they interviewed her, they were saying, where did you come from? She had no idea. She was 4 or 5 years old when she was shipped into this country illegally. She has no connection to any country except ours. And she had suffered years upon years of abuse. And it was only after having a daughter, because of that said abuse, did she try and escape. And after, that horrific ordeal, our government had said, no, look, we're going to send you back to where you come from. You've got no right to be here. And I have no idea what happened to that poor girl, which is, it's terrifying that, she's gone back to somewhere she doesn't know if they've ever proved that she had a place to go to in the first place. What an awful, awful thing that's going on in this country right now.
Shameful, really shameful. And I know the money's not the main point, but I was reading about the Australian system they had as the same as this, and it came down to about £1.6 million per person they offshored in the end, because it was just such a catastrophic, ridiculously stupid idea. So
we can't be scared of having the economic argument, because we have ethics and morals, and we have that character, and we want to lead on the things that matter and hit home. But sometimes we have to lean into the economic argument for the people who are heartless and cold and don't want to hear the real life true stories that are going on. There's no shame in that.
Thank you. And just going back to Paul, do you think that the Tories have misread this? Do you think they've upset as many of their voter base as they've pleased with this, what we think of as a racist policy?
I think they've rattled the media a little bit. I think that media class have kind of gone, hang on, there's something not right about this. And I think they're realising how racist it is, how nasty it is. I don't think it's going to alienate their base too badly. Those are going to be a lot of those people are never going to change their mind. But again, this isn't really... They always want to get votes, and they always want to win votes from wherever that will come from. They know that they've got a strong base that will vote for them no matter what. So it's not going to hugely offend a lot of their voters, because they just simply won't care about this. And there's been this media narrative for years and years and years about people coming over in boats. But also they're trying to protect their business model, as Stuart said. My point about not really going into economics is that shouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction. You need to frame this in the argument's there to be had, but let's also say it's inhumane. Let's start off by saying this is inhumane. These are people, and stop feeding into the narrative that these are something other than human beings. But Infosys, which is I believe Rishi Sunak's wife's company that she's heavily involved with, have registered quite a bit of business in Rwanda lately, and I have heard bits and pieces about perhaps building some prisons over there. So yeah, I think there's a huge business element to this, but whether or not it's going to affect their vote, I don't know, because people didn't really seem to care last time around. People didn't seem to care in 2019 that they were doing inhuman things. They've been doing this for years.
They have, haven't they? Right, so I'll go on to the next topic now. If Johnson goes, who might replace him? So Neil, what do you think about this?
If Johnson goes, who can replace him?
Larry.
I think he'll be dead by then. In all honesty, I'm not. I get kind of frustrated that we get so focused on who should lead us, who can lead us, and if Johnson resigns, should it be Sunak that takes over? Should it be Rod Hull's emu? Yeah, that would be a good one actually. I mean, just as much as a puppet as the ones that are there now. So fair enough. But the thing is that to me, it's not really about who the leader is. We've got a system at the moment that is so bad that isn't representing what we need. It's not really taking into consideration the things that are important to us, and that can be seen by the statement a couple of weeks ago by Sunak, where facing the cost of living crisis, it actually did nothing for the poorest, but give tax breaks for the rich. It's not about who can replace Boris Johnson, because whether we get another Tory in his place, whether it's Sunak or Liz Truss, with the pork markets or anyone else, or even for that matter at the moment, if we end up with Labour, it's not going to change the system. The system needs to change, and because whichever government we have, whoever that government is led by, is propping up this same system. It's propping up the system that thinks that food banks are a good economic option for people. Until we get rid of that system, nothing's going to change. And to say, well, who should change is a bit like, saying, well, which bucket of excretia doesn't smell as nice? I mean, it's the same thing in the end. You don't want it near you. And I think that's the point we have to come to, thinking, well, actually, we don't want the bucket of excretia anymore. We actually want a bucket of flowers instead, and it ain't going to happen with the current system.
Thank you. Who would be your most worrying replacement for Johnson?
I've not got all night to go through that. Jeremy Corbyn would have been a fantastic option, to give us something real, something different, something, to what we've got now. But of course, the establishment made sure that didn't happen, and it kind of links back to the earlier topic about Boris Johnson lying. Remember the furore over Jeremy Corbyn. He didn't bow as much. He was wearing a tweed jacket, But yeah, calling Boris Johnson a liar is the worst thing ever, apparently. So it's a system that needs to go. I don't think any of them. I honestly, I dread to think who can. I mean, imagine someone like Priti Patel, pretty nasty being Prime Minister. Can you imagine that? I mean, when you see that front row, I can't see. I honestly, I think at least with Boris Johnson, we know what we've got. That's the only defence that I can possibly think of him remaining in post. We know what we've got. We know what to do to attack him. But I'd far rather we got rid of the system. We need to deal with the system rather than it just being about one individual.
Thank you. Paul, who would be your worst case scenario as a replacement for Johnson?
Priti Patel. I think that's about the only one that could possibly be worse, but I don't even know whether that's worse. It's all like, it's like, which one's the smelliest turd? It's like, oh yeah, that one's particularly smelly, but like, I don't want any of them, to be honest. I don't want to be going around sniffing turds. So
So looking pretty bleak then.
Yeah.
Stuart, is there anyone in the Tory party who you could think of that could replace Johnson that would be a relief for you to see sitting on the benches in comparison to the situation we've got now?
You see, every time that this is a possibility, I always think, wow, soon. And I remember all the months I used to wait, going, another week and Theresa May will be gone. Oh, it's just around the corner. It's just around the corner. And it's like this, it's such a shit feeling, right? Because you know that when they're gone, when they're beaten, it's no better for you. It's no better for the people that you want to make lives better. There's no real victory in it, is there? It's just this kind of roundabout. Just go, it's like watching a roller coaster go around. You hear all the screams, and then it's nothing again, and it's such an awful feeling. We need a general election, and we need as Neil says, like, we need a government that's going to change people's lives.
We do, thank you. And Sam, I'm going to take a question from the comments there. Paul says, is it not that the whole Corbyn debacle shows that you have to be in the right club or the establishment will nullify you? Is anyone going to survive as a Prime Minister at this time if they're not part of that elite group?
I mean, that's something that we need to come to terms with, is the fact that I think what Jeremy Corbyn's leadership showed us is that if you challenge people with power too much, you won't win. They will destroy you. So there's a lot of people, and I know not everybody is. Obviously, I am a Labour Party member, and there's lots of people who are very angry at the Labour Party at the moment because they think they've backtracked too much, they've gone too much to the centre. But it may just be a political impossibility to get somebody like Jeremy Corbyn in power, because they're not going to let it happen, right? So we need to find a way in which we can get, I mean, the left of this government is a massive, massive space, right? Anything is to the left of this government. So I think if people really, really value being on the left of anything, they have to accept what is actually feasibly realistic, given the fact that people with power own the media, and they will demonize a gardener from Islington because he wants to take too much money off them in tax, full stop.
Thank you. And then I just asked Neil, do you want Johnson to step down and be replaced?
With what? I mean, I think Stuart summed it up perfectly. That I was same as him. I was like, when David Cameron stepped down, I was jumping around my living room. I really was. When Theresa May stepped down and she did that cry on Downing Street, I was jumping around the living room, and each time we're thinking, at last we've got rhythm. But look at the cabinet around him. He's responsible for his cabinet. He's responsible for the policies that they come up with. They don't happen entirely automatically. They're through him. He's the Prime Minister. I'm not saying he knows all of the detail of all of the policies, but he'll certainly know the headlines of them. And he must be like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So he's encouraging them to have these dreadful, awful policies for where we can have someone like, Michael Fabricant saying that teachers were having piss-ups in the staff lounges during the pandemic. It's ridiculous. Without knowing who should replace him, I'd rather, as awful as it is, I'd rather keep him, because we know what we've got, and that isn't a good option. And I'm really not proud for saying that, but we need better options, and Labour at the moment aren't producing a better option. Keir Starmer, who I've run out of juice because I mentioned him. There's no option. There's no alternative. So until we have that, I don't know. And I can imagine there being some comments about me saying that we should keep him for the moment, but I don't want him. I don't want him as a Prime Minister. But it's a system we have to tackle. It's a system we have to fight, in order so that we do have options if we don't like it. Because at the moment, the reality is we change a government, we have the same system. It doesn't matter at the moment, whether it's Labour or whether it's the Tories, it's the same. And and the bucket of shit that's the cabinet at the moment. As Paul said, which one smells the best? Well, none of them do.
Thank you. I've never seen so many comments discussing excrement in different terms come up on the screen in one section of a show. So there are loads of really good comments, but I've already stolen some of Sam's show. I'm so sorry, Sam. So I'm going to go on to your bit. So we're looking at the energy crisis and Just Stop Oil's horrific experience on GMB, Good Morning Britain. So what happened?
Yeah, so I didn't watch the thing, as a lot of people didn't watch the thing. They just saw the social media thing after the thing, which was that basically Good Morning Britain were grilling this young climate activist from Just Stop Oil, and it was very much like that film Don't Look Up. A lot of us watched Don't Look Up. It was like Christmas, wasn't it, that came out? And it's a farce about how ridiculous people are about the obvious impending catastrophe. In the film, it's a meteor, isn't it? But it's obviously an analogy for the climate catastrophe that we're seeing at the moment. So it was just so strange that it was just so much like that, because we had Richard Madeley being the overpowering TV presenter who had all the power in the situation, and another panelist, and everybody was just basically like ripping the piss out of this lass who was on there because she'd been invited to represent her cause. And I think, there are many times, as somebody who's come into politics as a young person, and young in politics is under 50, right? Somebody who's come into politics as a reasonably young person, the amount of time that I've been told, you get respect when you give respect, you wait till it's your moment to speak, and then you speak calmly and politely, and people will listen to you. And that's absolutely not what is happening to climate activists of all ages at the moment. They're literally ridiculed on TV. And remember that piece where that guy was talking to the climate activist from Insulate Britain about what he did for a job. And he's like, you're a carpenter, you chop down trees, you hit trees. And he's like, well, trees do grow back. And it's just really strange seeing people who are, and I'm not saying I agree with all the methods or everything else, I'm not part of those movements, but when people are speaking just plain and simple truths and just bringing out some statistics that are well known, and you've got the grown-up, the so-called power figure on the panel just going, well, I know you are, you say you are, but what am I? As a response. I think that's a worry, because, we all know that you only resort to personal insults when you've lost the argument. And if people don't actually have a good argument against climate activists, then maybe we should be listening to them.
Thank you. And do you think that climate activists are overreacting?
Look, I think there's a real power in direct action. As a feminist, I can't deny that. The women who got me my rights did so through arson, right? And throwing themselves into horses and doing some really, really extreme direct action. We're not seeing climate activists doing arson. I think lying down in the middle of a road is a pretty tame, non-violent expression, and something that we're all within our rights to do at the moment as it stands, and may not be within our rights to do in the future as our country moves to further limit our rights to protest, which is a worry.
And why do you think that groups like Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, why do you think they're carrying on when they get such a negative response from the media and public?
Well, the thing is, the negative response gives them a platform, doesn't it? So these are very selfless individuals. Actually, they're really not helping. They're not giving themselves a career leg up. They're not earning themselves money by blockading Amazon warehouses. They're probably causing themselves some real damage to their lives and to their future, especially if they get arrested. That could impact on their future. But they are so keenly focused on the fact that things have to change now or we won't have a future, that I think they're in that medium now where they're just like, any publicity is good publicity because it gets us on TV, it gets the message out, and that's more important than us ourselves.
Thank you. Paul, do you think that the response of the media to climate protests is informed by public opinion or shaped? Sorry, Paul, should I say that again?
Kind of, yes, please. Yeah, if you can say that again, that'd be great. Oh, you're frozen again. Capitalist broadband again. Here we go. You're back.
Oh,
go for it.
Did I freeze? Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think the response of the media to climate protesters shapes public opinion, or is shaped by it?
It's a bit of both, I think. Obviously, like, the media don't want things to change. Like, the billionaires don't want things to change because it would inconvenience them, and it would inconvenience them to an extent that it wouldn't inconvenience everyone else. Like, they've got shares in oil companies, they've got all sorts of reasons to want to continue to put, like, fuel into their private jets and all this stuff that they'd be dreadfully inconvenienced by. So they're absolutely desperate that we don't change the way we live. They're absolutely desperate that things keep on going the way they do, the way they're going. That said, people can, like, influence things by having a different opinion. People can have a positive influence. I actually think that the other day, Richard Madeley, he didn't really expose himself because, pardon the terminology there, he's never done that before. I think he did shoplift a bottle of champagne before. But I just forgot about it. I just went along and put the champagne in my basket and forgot to pay a few times. But Richard Madeley has been an idiot for years and years. But what it does is it exposes the fact that people are willing to employ absolute idiots and have them as the spokesperson for their thing. He's like, as if he's a good presenter. Like, he's an accidental Partridge. He's always like accidental Partridge, but he's not funny. I was like, before we came on, when I was talking about, like, one of my memories from my youth was when he was shouting at someone, telling them they had postnatal depression. Just going, you've got postnatal depression in the middle of an interview, just repeating that again and again and again. The guy's a moron, and yet he's given this platform where he's speaking for the people. He's got nothing to do with the people. He's not your every man on the street. He's absolutely alien to most people that I would have ever met. He makes Jeremy Clarkson seem down to earth. These are the people who the media raise up and say, yeah, that's the guy for us. That's the one we want. So in a way, it exposes the media. Sadly, far too many people do agree with what the media tell them.
Thank you. Stuart, what's the issue with Rees-Mogg's assertion that we need to extract every drop of North Sea oil?
What's the issue with it? The fact that it's nonsense. Yeah, I mean, clearly there's valuable resources there, but we've just been shown quite vividly that we shouldn't be dependent on fossil fuels for a number of reasons. And now is the correct time to invest the money that would have been going into getting that oil, and propping up those big companies like Shell and whatnot. by actually sticking it into the businesses that are creating a greener future. I think, there's this kind of thing where it's the easy answer, isn't it? To say, oh, well, we've got all this coal and we've got all this oil. When, it was 5 years ago or something, when we were telling Scotland that, there wasn't enough oil and there wasn't enough coal, that they didn't have enough to survive by themselves. And we use it as this kind of get out of, card, like going around the Monopoly board, that no matter what's the issue, oh, well, we'll just go get more out of the North Sea, it'd be fine.
And Neil, do you think this is an issue that has wider support amongst younger people?
Undoubtedly, because the younger you are, the more likely you are to be affected by climate change and the climate emergency that we have. I mean, specifically about this interview on GMB, it was a car crash interview. There's no two ways about that. They tried to wind her up, and she just didn't take the bait. I mean, at one point, Richard Madeley did actually turn around and say, well, you're a hypocrite because you're wearing clothes. That's pretty much what he said to her, because, well, clothes are, your clothes have come here from another country and they've used oil in order to get here. So he pretty much said, I'm not going to listen. He didn't say this, but he pretty much said, but unless you're naked, I'm not even going to listen to you. I mean, it was that kind of ridiculous, stupid argument. And each time she kept coming back to the science.
Oh, Neil, you've muted. We heard up to the science.
Every time it kept coming back to the science, but it kept talking about the disruption. Well, is it right you're disrupting people going about their everyday lives? But yet, one thing that was entirely missed from the debate was the fact that people are already being disrupted as a result of climate change. We're having more floods, we're having more issues such as that. I mean, down the road from me, just maybe 10 miles away, is the Calder Valley, which floods every year now. And it was supposed to be one in every generation. And then in addition to that, they were saying about, the point about, well, how do we get our message across? Rather than, the way to get the message across would be if media presenters such, I don't call him a journalist, he's not a journalist, he's a media presenter, is Richard Madeley. If they instead stop talking about the disruption and ask them, okay, well, what is the science? What's it telling us? And give them that platform to explain it. Because they talk about the disruption, but yet what she talks about on 2 or maybe 3 occasions in that interview was there's a man who's currently sat outside the House of Parliament on hunger strike because of climate change, demanding to speak to the government. Right? He's on hunger strike. He's not affecting anybody else's life. But there's a report in the Morning Star on Saturday, which said that if he, in a few days' time, so approximately now, if he hasn't had any food or water, the damage to his body will be irreparable. And even his MP, who was a Tory, is saying, let's get a meeting with you. Let's get a meeting with the government in order to try and save this guy's life. So when people are doing individual acts that aren't an impact on anyone else, there's no message. There is no way of getting that message across. So therefore, when people are then blocking oil depots and stuff like that, oh, well, you're disrupting people's lives because people might not be able to get petrol, etc., etc. And it just doesn't really add up. And it's like, well, if we actually concentrate on the science, which, to be fair, everyone on this panel has talked about the science, but, and if actually people like Richard Madeley start talking about the science rather than focus on the disruption and actually voicing that anger and give people a platform to have a proper debate. I mean, that woman, the person who countered the lass from Just Stop Oil was so patronizing. She said, well, but it's okay for you. You're young. I'm double your age and I've got children. I've got grandchildren. I've got a job. I've got this. I've got that. It's like, what is that? Is that the quality of your debate that you have to patronize somebody else rather than because you don't want to talk about the IPCC report, which says we are now on the precipice, and and we're very close to not being able to undo the damage caused by climate change. And I do think there's a lot of business interest in this, as Paul correctly highlighted, and that's why it's a constant distraction from talking about the real thing. So yeah, I think, as far as I don't necessarily agree with all of the tactics, but if it's what they want to do, I'm fully supportive of them, because something has to change one way or the other, and we're not going to have a government that's going to listen and take the advice seriously. So all power to them, in my opinion.
Thank you, Neil. So Sam, I'm going to hand back to you, and I'm so sorry. And John, if you're still watching, you need to be back next week and stop this from happening again. Thank you, everyone. There's so many good comments, but I've stolen so much of Sam's show already, so I'm going to hand over.
All right, we're going to go to No Passaran and have a little bit of a break, and then come back for 20 minutes or so, yeah?
Cool. See you in a minute, everyone.
See you in a minute.
My name is Jack Atkins and I'm not afraid, and I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist, a dead one, they say, and around the real we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. But for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure, and around the real we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother, be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm a real we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past us first, and around the real we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here, no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today. Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello, it is me. I am back. It is the after show. We're gonna only do about 20 minutes because I'm knackered, you're knackered, we're all knackered. And actually, Jane did a really good job through the show of bringing in some of the comments. I mean, she did a really good job through the show, full stop, but she also did a good job of picking up some of the comments while she was going through. So you can have a bit of a meander now, a bit of a meander. Fun fact, I heard on the news when I was having my tea that of the G20 nations, our economy will be growing the least. And there's only one country that's below us in the G20 for growth, and that's Russia.
Wow.
So
Incredible.
this was and if you remember, so sort of 4 weeks ago, I did say the government was starting to scapegoat the war in Ukraine for the economic catastrophe that we are seeing. That is out there now. They are blatantly saying it. But if that is the case, why isn't it affecting all of the countries that are in receipt of gas via Russia and Ukraine and just us? Why is it affecting us so badly? Might it be because it's not just because of the war in Ukraine that we were already heading for an economic catastrophe? And Mark says in the comments, what spurred me off to think about this is that when we were talking about petrol shortages in various filling stations around the place, the AA have confirmed that it's more about people panic buying than actual shortages of supply. You know what it's like. All somebody has to do is put it on a local Facebook group, don't they? Oh, looks like they're running out of petrol in X place, and then everybody's going to go down there. It reminds me of a story which I'm not going to tell you because actually it might bore you a little bit too much, but maybe another time I'll tell you a story about how the aristocracy tried to bankrupt Barclays Bank rather than allow the first steam passenger railway be born in the northeast. Yes, Jacqueline says Jane does a great job. She absolutely does. She's also saying something about Clark Gable. Wasp. Jacqueline says she's hardly seen a wasp, a bee, or any other insect last summer. This is a real thing, this, Jacqueline. The experts say what we're living in is green deserts, which is that we look like there's wildlife out there, but actually there's very little life happening in the undergrowth. There's very little we're living in an ecological emergency, which
she's
is
definitely stirred up a hornet's nest there, hasn't she?
Oh, there he is with his jokes. Stuart, have you spotted any comments, or are there any particular issues you'd like
I've
to
not been able to keep up with you on the comments. I only get to see them in flashes. so I tend to miss any that are like phenomenal. That's not me just trying to get out of doing some work.
Well, Mark's asked a question, so I'll pose that question to you. Should we put limits on how much petrol people can buy?
Yeah, they do that with a wage and how little they pay us all, and the benefit cap and whatnot.
Well done. Oh dear.
The things with petrol being so expensive, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we not invade Iraq for its oil? So what? So why is fuel so expensive?
I don't know whether that was the official reason given. I think the official reason was WMDs that didn't exist, but
But the thing is, if I invaded KFC, I've got to tell you that chicken would be pretty cheap around where I live. I don't get it.
Yeah, but you'd be sharing the chicken. Obviously, currently, any extra oil that we have has been going to the very few people in control of it rather than being shared out to the people who need it.
And of course, wind's gone up lately, hasn't it? Because all that wind did you see Grant Shapps when he was sitting? Oh, well, there's no need for us to ration gas because they suggested, I think Labour had suggested that we should ration gas. There's no need to because we've got abundant wind supplies in the UK and we don't really rely very heavily on gas. No one asked the question, well, why have all the prices of electricity gone up if we aren't very reliant on gas? Why has the cost of wind gone up? Why has the standing charge gone up? Why has the cost of solar gone up? Everything's gone up. Oh, I think it's maybe because we're being conned by the massive companies rather than this being a necessary rise.
Talking of Grant Shapps, he's announced today that there's going to be half-price train tickets for a few weeks in order to boost more people being on trains. And please watch the video that he's done. It is absolutely cringeworthy. It's kind of like, I don't know which 1980s director who hasn't upgraded his equipment since he used, but it's it's worth a watch. It really is. But it's all about Great British Rail and saying about how great it is, because what Great British Rail is going to do is take the blame away from the train operating companies when things go wrong. So it'll be a public sector that takes the blame, whilst the private sector runs off with the profits. But 75% of our railways are now actually run by the government.
I mean,
ScotRail has come back under public ownership now.
We don't own the trains in the slightest, though.
No.
Which is a big one. We don't own a single carriage or train or single asset along those railways. So essentially, all we've got is we're still allowing them to cream off every penny that they can in that system.
But even, I mean, everyone who knows me knows that I do photograph trains, and I know a few bits about trains. But even I didn't know that until a couple of years ago. And how it came to light that I knew that was that the Pacer trains were going to be taken out of service and put in the National Rail Museum as part of their, I think it was their 10-year plan. But the Rail Museum was complaining because actually they couldn't have the Pacer trains because they were still in use. And when we looked into it, we realised they're owned by a company called Grayling, not to be confused with anything to do with Chris Grayling, and they're leased by a company called Angel. And so you're right, the actual rolling stock aren't owned by the companies, they lease them. But then the tracks that they run on are owned by us. So it's quite confusing to work out exactly which bit then do the train operating companies actually own. And the reality is they don't really own much of it at all. In fact, we could bring the railways back into full public ownership, very, very quickly and very, very cheaply and easily. Sorry, I just
No, it's okay.
I couldn't help myself there.
Anytime anybody wants to talk about trains to me, I'm all ears. It's just Grant Shapps. Just whenever anybody mentions him as a person, I always have a little giggle. Because I remember that he used to have a second name. He used to, he had a second job as a multi-million-dollar web marketer under the pseudonym Michael Green. He's like, what planet is he on? And that's why he loves these little skits. I haven't seen the recent one about the train ticket sell-off, but I obviously saw the one about the competition to find the headquarters of the Great British Railways with him and Michael Portillo, which was another comedy thing. And also, like, this is like literally they trade on being the party of fiscal responsibility. So how do we choose where we're going to site the headquarters of this really important new like civil service department? Let's have a competition. What? We really have
worked so well with Boaty McBoatface, so doing the competition, the public will take us seriously.
The main thing that I think of with Grant Shapps, every time his name comes up, is the fact that when he was in charge of the Young Conservatives thing, he bullied people to the point where more than one person took their lives as a direct result of what he was doing. And that was entirely covered up by the Tory party. And he's never faced any accountability for what he did. And that's always the first thing I think of with him. I'm sorry to bring the mood down a little bit, but we must remember what kind of arsehole he is, and I'm sorry for using that word, but anyone who drives someone to death through bullying, is not worth anything in my opinion. And I'm sorry for bringing the mood down, but that is the first thing I always think of with him.
I'd never heard of that, so thanks for mentioning it. Mark mentioned, just to ramp the mood back up there, Mark mentions in the comments that if you are going to get cheap train tickets, try and get cheap train tickets to the Durham Miners Gala in July, and with banners held high, which is in May.
14th of May in Wakefield.
Yeah. I will be at those events.
There's also Ogilvy Truth and Justice March in Sheffield on the 18th of June as well.
Yes, and I don't know if I'm going to get that.
That's a good one to go to. If you want to go to the Miners' Gala as well, if you're a Mara, be a Mara, because you sign up to a monthly thing. If you do it, you can get discounted camping at the moment. So I think the full price is £20. But it's going to be a little bit less than that. I think it's only quite a bit less than that if you're a Mara.
Like 20% off, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's an early bird thing as well. So I think it might be 20% off that as well. So it's quite good. 20% off whatever it is at the moment, like $17.50 or something. So yeah, come up to the Miners' Gala camp. That might be fun. Sing some campfire songs.
And Mark's shouting out the Chainmakers. Is it Chainmakers Festival? I don't know. I don't know how that ends.
Chainmakers near Mark, and then there's Tolpuddle as well. Tolpuddle Mall.
Yeah, let's go to the mall. I wish I had enough money to just go to the mall. It's one of my, like, in life, I'll have done well if I manage to get enough money to have like a little camper van and just be like, I'm going. It's the summer. I'm going.
Unions sometimes pay for you to go, Samantha.
Yeah.
You've just got to take a banner and do work. Yeah.
Take a banner and do work.
Which you would do anyway.
Which you would do anyway.
Yeah, I would, because I am a grafter. Great. Where else are we? What other comments have we got?
Hello, Quantum Skyline. Late, but nice to see you.
Yeah. There was a good question from Jacqueline.
Late but never early is one of the names for LNER. Late but never early. LNER.
Oh, right, sorry. I'm like, yes, LNER, late but never early. Jacqueline said, are we going to leave transitioning to renewables to the last possible minute? Jane, what do you think?
Yeah, if this government have anything to do with it, then we will, won't we? They're doing absolutely nothing. and our current energy strategy in the country, aren't they? They are going to use offshore wind farms, but they're completely ignoring onshore wind farms. They're not going to bother with that, and they're going to build expensive nuclear power stations that we won't be able to use for a lot of years instead, even though we need to do something right now. So definitely think that's going to happen.
Would you
Let me
trust,
tell you,
given
by
the
the
way they
way-
run the country, would you trust them to build a nuclear power station? Like they would just, I'm sure they would just give contracts to the mates who've never done it before. Like, oh, my mate from down the pub. Well, he actually runs the local tennis association. So I've given him the contract, the old contro for the nuclear power station. Yeah. You can imagine that. Like you really can
They
imagine
did
them
it with PPE, like.
giving someone. Well, they did, didn't they? Like the ones that didn't exist whatsoever. You can imagine them giving a contract for something like that to someone who has nothing to do with it. Says, can you sell a car? Then you can run a nuclear power station. It's just preposterous. Like, it doesn't even sound that far fetched.
Who'd get the contract for the toxic waste?
Rwanda.
Well, I tell.
Like, yeah, like it sounds like I don't want to say protest, but 100%, they're just waiting to line all these things up, aren't they? They're waiting till they've got a model where it's like Priti Patel's making the blades for offshore windmills, right? Or Johnson's mate's he's got his qualifications now in building a power station. And when everybody's all lined up, then they'll go, we're going to have a green economy. We're going to have to put your taxes up to pay for it. And then that's when it'll kick in. But yeah.
Government sanctioned holidays brought to you by G4S. You can just imagine, you just like have government holidays. What I think they're doing is all the worst things about the Soviet Union. They seem to be sort of like doing like this kind of contracts for friends and that kind of thing, and targets and running things badly, and and having this like centrally planned thing, because they've got like this centrally planned system where they're giving all the like they'll plan something and say, we're going to do an infrastructure project, but we'll give it to the private sector and give them far too much money and make sure that you make profit out of it. So they've got like this worst aspect of capitalism and this worst aspect of what happened that went wrong in Russia and the USSR and things like that.
But I don't
think they originally got things a lot more right.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't think the government leave it to the last minute. I don't think they will. They'll leave it to the last possible nanosecond is what they'll do, because that's what our government do. Our government doesn't have a plan for anything. It wings it. And then when it goes wrong, it's then Jeremy Corbyn's fault, as everything is. You know what I mean? I stubbed my toe this morning. That damn Jeremy Corbyn. Everything's Jeremy Corbyn's fault when it comes to this government. So
Jeremy Corbyn's. I love those memes, by the way.
Now that Jeremy Corbyn's not in the picture, it's like Tinkerbell. It's our fault because we didn't believe enough in the government to make it happen. We kept talking the country down, and that's why.
Was that what that clapping was about? You clap your hands to wake up. That was what the clapping was about for the NHS, to that, because we believe in fairies. It was like to wake Boris Johnson up.
Can you remember? Like in 2019, the manifesto, and then the Tory party had theirs, and it was full of nonsense. But then a couple of policies that were Labour policy were enacted under a Conservative government. Are they just waiting for the next, batch of manifestos to come out from political parties to then, pick and choose from the ones that they're going to implement under a Conservative rule? To get us into a green economy? Are they actually waiting for somebody else to do the donkey work and then, implement it as they see fit, manipulated to fit their economics.
Yeah, well, I've said it before. It's like that game that you play on Facebook. Sometimes corrupt a wish. It's like we'll give you some nice sounding policies, and then they'll be enacted underneath a conservative government, and they'll totally ruin them. So they've cottoned on that people are a bit miffed about, there being no services for under fives in the country anymore. So they're bringing in these family centres, which actually, if anybody sees one, let me know, because they haven't actually produced enough funding to make these family centres happen anywhere. It's not going to create a single children's centre extra in County Durham, that's for sure. But they've got it on a website, and so if anybody ever asks, they can say, oh, this is the policy and this is how many millions of pounds we've put into it, despite the fact there's not enough money in there to actually make the policy happen.
Family Centres, brought to you by G4S.
Yeah. Is this the long-term goal here, right? Isn't really about shipping asylum seekers and migrants to Rwanda. What they're doing is they're setting up the infrastructure so they can ship us all to Rwanda when England is underwater. Is that the plan? I mean,
who do the work bailing out their castles? They need someone to bail out their castles for them. Castle bailing out, brought to you by G4S. Sorry, I'll let that joke go now.
The Conservatives don't even understand the policies that they put forward in 2019. I spoke. There was a by-election round our way, wasn't there, Sam? And the Conservative candidate had said that she's going to tackle all the potholes in the ward. So I said, Boris Johnson's manifesto said that he was making £500 million available each year for the next 4 years to tackle potholes. And then the sitting Conservative county councillor came in and said that it's not the government's responsibility to tackle potholes, it's the county councillors. I was like, but you communicated this policy to us. This was a big manifesto pledge. Are you saying that either your party didn't understand the responsibilities of the government, or that you're totally distancing yourself from the manifesto that won you in a general election? There's a total disconnect between the policies that the Conservative Party commit to and the ones they actually deliver.
Let's not forget, Labour came up with the Green Industrial Revolution under Rebecca Long Bailey, and it was a fantastic piece of work. It was really, really, really good. And so what the Tories have done is taken the Green Industrial Revolution and ripped it apart and said, well, okay, we'll adopt the bits that we like of it, but that's it. It's like bus companies are saying we're green, we're greener now than what we were because we painted our buses greener, so they must be greener. It's like, well, it's like, I had green beans with my tea. Doesn't make, but I cooked them on gas. It's not, it's not green. It's like, we attach the word green to anything. It's a bit like in the 80s where the word turbo meant anything great. You know what I mean? It's like, people had turbo toothbrushes and shite like that. It's the same thing, just in a modern context. So we. That's really what we've become now. It's like, we've become all a marketing gimmick. That's what we all are.
Greenwashing, John D. Clare says. Absolutely. I remember, so I used to run a non-profit company which was about sustainability in the nursery sector, and we hired out cloth nappies and slings and baby carriers and other baby type goods. We hired them out. It was a library of things, right? So then you don't have to buy it. You're only going to use it for 3 months of this child's life. You don't need to buy it. You can borrow it off us. It was about sustainability. So we used to go to, there's a big nursery show in Harrogate every year, and we went there for a couple of years, and we just spent the whole time taking people to task about greenwashing. Don't tell me these, and by the way, I am a hypocrite. I didn't use cloth nappies with my own babies. But don't tell me that your disposable nappies are green because they've got soy-based inks on them, right? That's the type of things that people claim. It's still got like 100 different types of glue in it. It's still going to take 100,000 years to decompose in landfill. It's not green just because you've literally, as Neil says, put a picture of something green on the packaging. So many examples of that in our economy. Grr.
Pictures of meadows on a prison, brought to you by G4S.
You're gonna have to mock up some of those adverts and play them on social.
Quantum Skylines on it, coming up with all sorts. So.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Taxi service is brought to you by G4S.
Yeah. And we had a local Tory councillor stand, and part of his platform was I'm standing to bring back youth centres. And it's just like, why do you think we don't have any youth centres anymore, you old knob? It's not right. I believe, and I am willing to hold my hands up and say that we don't always get things right as politicians, especially even in the Labour Party. We're not perfect, but we not sit there thinking about ways to destroy youth services, right? It's never going to be something that people want to do. And somehow, they just divorce these things from the fact that their government has a responsibility to fund things. And you can't, youth workers don't grow on trees. They need to be nurtured, they need to be trained, and they need to be paid. G4S clockwork porridge, that's Paul. Wonderful. I
Youth workers brought things. To you by Capita.
Yeah, youth workers, prison workers, same difference, right?
They're going to do funerals one day, aren't they? It's going to be like a state funeral.
Yeah.
And G4S are going to be the ones delivering it.
It'll be like the American healthcare service, where they spend more per person by $4,000 than anyone in the world, and they still have to pay for it. Funerals, brought to you by G4S.
Yeah, it will be. Oh man, we're going into.
If it was anything like the Olympics, it would just be no one would ever be buried. Remember the Olympics in 2012 when they gave G4S the security contract? And they were like, oh no, we're going to have to bring the army in because they haven't done it. And they still paid them. They were like, oh, well, G4S made loads of money out of it. And then there was nothing done and the army had to do it.
Well, the funny thing is with the Olympics, they relied on, how did it cost so much when the overwhelming vast majority of the staff were volunteers? They didn't get paid.
Didn't it come out that each uniform's like 12 grand? And it's like...
Uniforms. Brought to you by G4S.
It's like, it's a black shirt and some trousers. Maybe a padded vest. 12 grand. That's some pretty fancy drip there.
I camped in a field for the Olympics, and they had over one portable toilet, which was as nice as you can imagine.
Whilst we're talking about the Olympics, did anyone ever hear the story of Lund Point? Oh, let me tell you about this. Yes. Lund Point was a block of flats in Newham, literally just over the road from the Olympic Park, that was owned by, I think it was the council. I think it was Newham Borough Council that owned it. And it was a tower block of flats of council tenants. And they were all evicted and moved out and dispersed across, not just across London, but actually some across the country. And the reason was the TV companies such as BBC, ITV, Sky, and from other companies across the world wanted to use that block of flats because it had a great view over the Olympic Park. So a good bit of social cleansing there for the Olympics. Not something you associate with the Olympics, is it really? Any bad treatment of anyone. Oh. So, yeah.
Imagine if you heard that from another country. If you'd have heard China had been doing it, there'd have been outcry. This is disgraceful, and
If you look it up, you'll find that it's genuinely true. And I'm not sure if there's people living in there now or what happened after the Olympics. I'm really not sure. But they actually gutted the block of flats out in order to put in the things needed to run the studios and the extra electric and all that kind of stuff. And they gutted a lot of the floors in order to put that stuff in there, and then took it out the week after the Olympics.
A lot of private renters were asked to vacate their properties for the period of the Olympics. They could be rented at extortionate rates, and my friend signed a rental contract up in Manchester a few months afterwards, and she lived there for quite a few years, and they put a clause into the contract saying you will vacate the property for the full August every year. And she did say to them, can you take this out? And they were just like, no, not really. Do you want somewhere to live? They never enforced it, but it's just so shoddy.
Landlords. By G-Force.
I think
You
it's
will have a
agency.
home to sleep in, but it just might not be the same one every night, all right?
Oh, no.
What do you...
They weren't going to provide an alternative. She just had to get out for the whole of August, but still pay the rent. So nice.
But it's only bricks and mortar. I mean, why would you be attached to it? That's why, But G4S, we will supply the bricks.
When there's a nice bench around the corner with spikes on it, you could be sleeping on.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's August.
Brought to you by
G4S, housing
G4S.
prisoners for years.
Anyway, we're going to leave that. You can do your own research on this social cleansing around the Olympics. Okay, I'm going to leave that for you. That's your homework, listeners, right? And we are going to leave you for tonight because it is late and we are tired and it's the end of the show. The show has to have an end eventually. That's just logic. So remember, you can find us on YouTube and on Twitch and on whatever podcast and Facebook and whatever podcast apps you might have on your phone. There is literally tons of content, Socialist Think Tank stuff out there, and you can become a member of Socialist Think Tank for free and talk absolute shit on Discord all times of the day. And thank you very much, Jane, for presenting today. You've been absolutely brilliant, and thank you, Neil, for coming on. If anybody does want to come on, just give us a shout. Just light a flare in the sky, and wave, or perhaps email Socialist Think Tank, and we will get you on, because we actually do need people to come on, because maybe some of us have meetings to go to, So we'll see you next week on Tuesday at 9:00 on all of those platforms. Bye.
And if there are any G4S fans out there who are sad at our treatment of G4S tonight, we are regulated by Impress, and they may criticise us for poor humour. And that's it. So you can complain to Impress about us, because we've got journalistic standards and integrity, unlike a lot of other people who just seem to say whatever they want and not make a joke of it. So take care, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Keep the red flag flying here.